script. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. And we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix, and the Sinaiks peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And I think we have one late item. We're going to be adding, is that right? We're going to be adding a presentation from our Fire Chief, Len McCharles. Len, would you like to come up and?
To adopt the agenda.
Oh,
Motion to adopt the agenda.
first, yeah, sorry.
So moved to adopt the agenda.
Thanks.
Second.
Second by Councillor Page. All in favor? All right, thank you. And we're going to wait, before we get started, we're going to wait for Councillor Renwick to return.
And don't we have some minutes we have to pass?
We have to work on the minutes.
Sure, yeah, we'll crank through them. It's okay that we can,
Committee of the whole minutes for April 20th. Move the
just wondering if we should wait for
Must be accepted.
Councillor Renwick.
as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councillor Woodward, moved by Mayor Dooley, second by Councillor Woodward. All in favor?
Good job.
Thank
Nice.
you. That's the minutes. Where are the minutes? Okay. All right, Councillor Renwick is still not back. We will. Well, let's just get going. He's probably heard this. You can go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair. So this is a presentation talking about basically the transition from response mode for the City of Nelson into a recovery mode. And so what I'm presenting here this evening is the Community Recovery Framework for the City of Nelson. And essentially what we know by paying attention to the news, and it's all forefront of our minds, is that cases in British Columbia have dropped, thank goodness. We're happy to say that. And with that, the province, as we know, is relaxing restrictions over the coming weeks and months. We do know that the virus could reemerge, so we need to stay in a ready state in case we need to do some level of response. And from an EOC perspective, we need to sort of put ourselves in a position where not only can we respond to virus and other emergencies such as flood, wildfire, and severe weather, we need to be able to respond to those. We do need to take the energy and the focus that we've seen and been part of into a recovery mode. And I would argue that there's been a lot of good recovery work already done. It's probably best if we take that good energy and put it into a recovery framework, which is what I'm proposing here. One of the things that the framework does is it looks to include all of society, and that's our whole community approach, which is really important in all phases of emergency management, but certainly in the recovery phase. So what the framework does identify is what recovery is, who should lead and who should be involved, how to structure recovery, the role of council in recovery, the processes to be effective, and very importantly, the critical role of strategic communications. So first of all, emergency management pillars, mitigation, preparedness, and response. We've talked about a lot in the past, and we can continue to do so. Recovery is one of those ones where we actually hope we don't need to actually find ourselves involved in, but that is where we are with COVID. And so community recovery is about, and on the bottom right-hand side there, you see a number of words: reestablishing, rebuilding, restoring, repairing, facilitating, advocating, collaborating, encouraging, and all those things preface social, cultural, physical, economic, personal, community, environmental well-being. Recovery is also about including members of the community, excuse me, our businesses, not-for-profits, our NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and in particular those who have been directly impacted. Recovery is about coordinating local government recovery with provincial and federal support programs and enhancing sustainability and resilience while reducing vulnerability to future disasters. Recovery timeframes, these are standard for every type of disaster out there, although the timeframes tend to change quite a bit. I would say for the pandemic, we are seeing that, at least I'm anticipating, each one of the timeframes to be drawn out even longer than normal. Legislation in British Columbia, we have first and foremost the BC Emergency Program Act, where it talks about local authorities must plan for and implement both response and recovery plans. We have the City of Nelson bylaw, which talks about the ability, among many other things, about the ability of council to establish a recovery operations center and to look to the appointment of a recovery manager. Community expectations. This is really where it's really at for recovery, and that is our community expects that local government understands what is needed and that they're prepared and have the ability to lead recovery. Our community trusts that local government has their interests at heart and will, in fact, lead recovery appropriately. So getting into the framework overview, essentially, this proposal has 4 sectors: people and communities, economy, infrastructure, development and planning, and environment. And in the report, there's a number of suggested topics that are in there that we could actually move to each one of these sectors depending on how the committees feel about having those things part of their work area. So, committees. So we need to strike a committee with representation from the city and from the community. Each committee needs to identify a lead or a chair, and I'm advising that there be either co-chairs or vice chairs or 2 team leads. Just in this day and age of pandemic, we need to be prepared that somebody may not be able to come because they're not feeling well, and so actually someone could carry the torch for them. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but we need to conduct a needs assessment, and based on that needs assessment, we need to develop action plans to meet those identified needs. We need to identify work already being done by groups and organizations, and we know there's lots of good work being done in our community. We need to identify opportunities to collaborate with the regional district or other communities and the province. We need to work with and through the recovery manager and recovery operations center, and the committees need to contribute to the community recovery plan as a whole, and they will just by the nature of their work. In essence, the recovery operations center, headed up by a recovery manager, provided guidance and direction from the policy group, which is council. Depending again on how things evolve, they may need the support, which is again very much, this is exactly how we set up an emergency operations center with these same resources. So that will evolve over time, and resource requirements will come clearer. The recovery manager, community recovery manager, so they would provide regular updates to council and reports to council if need be. They develop the COVID-19 community recovery plan, that's what you get in the end. Coordinate activities of the 4 sectors with sector leads, liaise with community organizations and agencies, businesses, neighboring local authorities to establish coordinated and collaborative relationships and work with the province and federal government. The community recovery manager would also lead the strategic external and internal communications. So the role of council, in addition to connecting with various federal and provincial ministries and community members, they would communicate recovery strategies with the public, share municipal financial and resource constraints. They would approve, and if not approve, they would amend and approve a community recovery framework, provide recovery oversight, establish overarching goals and outcomes, identify and approve policies as required. Very importantly, hear what the community has to say about their needs and the going forward. They would establish a recovery manager, establish a recovery operations center. That's a ROC, R-O-C, with the support required, and support the ROC through gathering and disseminating critical information and messages. Provide ongoing direction and guidance related to city business and operations. be prepared for COVID-19 to reemerge. Let's hope not, but the possibility is there to some degree or another. Ensure that community planning stays at the forefront and consistent and clear direction as a corporate body. And last but not least on this list is to create community confidence through positive messaging, honest, positive reinforcement of where we're headed and that we're going to be okay in this process. So an overview of the framework is showing the 4 sectors, the City of Nelson Recovery Operations Center, the recovery manager and their team, and there would be a reporting structure to the city manager and the policy group, which is you guys. So sort of the steps that make it all work is first the needs assessment. So this is to understand the impacts of the pandemic relative to sectors. It's about soliciting and getting very good information around who's been impacted and how they've been impacted and what the needs are. To identify the priorities, objectives, potential funding mechanisms, and coordination with other groups or organizations. As mentioned, there's lots of good work being done out there. It's going to be important to connect the needs assessment with the work that's being done. With the needs assessment, it's important to consider timeframes as discussed earlier, short, medium, long term, with a real focus on short and medium to actually get some things done. Action plans are based on the needs assessment. This is evidence and policy based. And it may be better to action a number of smaller achievable items rather than tackle big challenging ones, at least in the short and medium term. And each sector must understand the funding, resource, and staffing limitations in order to not overestimate what can be done. This is about that reality check to see what can we do, what's going to give us the biggest, excuse the colloquialism, but bang for your buck, where are we going to be able to really make some difference. And progress reporting, this can be qualitative or quantitative metrics, but it is really to show that we're on the right path. If there needs to be a course correction, you can take it, and very importantly, to communicate with our public to let them know the good work that's being done. And that's it for the presentation.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Woodward?
Thank you, Chief. That's great. I'm just wondering, in your mind, do you think as we move forward through this process that, we would have a website or like some way that the public can access and see like kind of where we're at in the process? Do you think that would be a valuable?
Not a bad idea. That's the kind of information or input that I think council gets to really understand and present that as something to be considered. Because communications, as we have talked about in the past, is one of the most important things that we can do in terms, short of the actions we'll take. But it is important to let our community know. So our website dedicated. In fact, I use the word strategic communications very deliberately because I think you'll get some very smart people who can come together and say, this is what strategic communications looks like for both internal and external audiences.
Thank you.
Councillor Page?
To some in the room, this will probably be a bit repetitive because you've already heard it, but for the public, I think we've watched this thing come from a lot of work that this council has done over the weeks previous and a lot of work that staff has put into coming up with a system and a framework that we can apply to this situation and to future situations to make sure that our community bounces back forward strongly. And I think as long as we're able to broadcast out that this is a prudent and safe jurisdiction, that we are a place that takes these things seriously and we respond to our community and do the small actionable things that keep people moving and keep action flowing and building up in response to what's going on, I think people will look back on this area and say, good work was done. I see the accumulation of the work you've put together as being pivotal going forward in terms of putting people together and figuring out what we need to do to move past this and grow stronger through this. So I really want to thank you, Chief, for putting this together for us.
Thank you. To the chair, if I may. I think I have a history of being through some big bad things in the communities I've been in, So I'm sorry if I'm having any relation to that here. But what I can say, to your point, Councillor Page, is that council has been very engaged right from the onset of realization of COVID-19 and that they've been very involved and very supportive. And I'm happy and honored to be working in a community like this and a council that, like yourselves, who really taken the responsibility seriously. And our community has and will be better served based on what you just talked about. So thank you.
I think council feels the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got two other items on the agenda that we're going to skip over or acknowledge but not address. The first is the presentations and the delegations. We are obviously not doing them today, but for the public at home who can't see this, we're obviously not allowing the public to come into the council meeting. So soon, I assume in upcoming, either next month or the month after, we should be able to resume normal proceedings. So we're moving to the CBT-CIP Adjudication. Gabe, do you want to give us anything to set the stage here, or?
Sure, Councillor. Just a couple quick words for you. In advance of this COW meeting and the allocation, I did look back at last year's procedure. As I'm sure all council is aware, there is a council policy on this matter that does loosely dictate, how the allocations are done, but there is quite a bit of flexibility, to match the circumstances at hand. Last year, I believe, what council did was they looked at the projects that had received a consensus in the sense that more than 4 councillors were, had chosen to allocate money in their individual spreadsheet. They went through those. They did a first sweep, starting with 7 down through 4, and spoke about those different projects. They made some adjustments as they saw fit, and then they did a second sweep that was a little bit, a little faster, just to kind of make sure that every project did get a second look. Last year we were dealing with a deficit in the sense that when looking at the consensus allocations, as I call them, there was actually money that needed to be added to the pot. This year, if you see on the spreadsheet that number up top that I've tried to make big, 35,122, you won't see that on your individual sheet. But what that number means is that if you took all the consensus votes, we are $35,000 over what we have to allocate. So we will be essentially trying to trim down to get that number down to 0. On that note, I think all of council here knows we found out late Friday from the RD that there was more money to allocate than had originally been anticipated. That's based on my understanding is projects that could not go forward from allocations that were made in 2019. That money has been reinserted into our pot. So the original number was $145,000. Now it is $172,064. One thing to note for council is that the arts jury did meet before we had that information. Per council policy in the past, council has generally allocated about 25% of the pot to projects designated in the arts group. So the recommended allocations from the arts jury were based on the $145,000 number. So they essentially took, I believe it was around $35,000, a quarter of that number, and that's where their allocations came from. Had they known that we were actually dealing with $172,000, they would have allocated an extra $6,662, which is a quarter of the additional funds. So just for council to keep that in mind. My understanding also is that the cultural development officer is on the line and can answer any questions that there may be about the arts jury and the allocations that they made. I think she was intended on joining. She may not be.
There she is now.
Yeah, so just in case any questions come up, she did want to be available. Beyond that, I will be here to plug the numbers in as council, arrives at decisions as you talk about some of these projects, and CAO Cormac or CFO McClure might have some additional input, but I'll be here to answer questions and to help out with the spreadsheet. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. So we've got $35,000 to shave. I feel like this could be like an auction. Go. Oh, yeah. Joy? Okay, Joy, can you say something?
Sorry, I was just muted. I am here. Can you hear
Great.
me?
Yeah, we can. Hey, Joy.
Okay.
Can I get a point of clarification?
Sure.
So as we move through this, we have to find a way of shaving off $35,000 from what we have here?
That's correct. So essentially,
From this-
well, for example, let's take. I think it might be worth looking at one or two as a quick example. So if you look at not your sheet, but the sheet that I prepared up top, if you took, for example, the actual project, might be difficult to read, but that first one, for example, well, that's an arts one. So the one below that, for example, is the application from the Friends of Pulpit Rock Society. So all 7 councillors deemed it appropriate to allocate money. In this case, enough councillors, which would be 4, had deemed it appropriate to allocate $2,000. So that becomes the starting point under the way that we've done this in the past. Whereas, for example, if you go down to something that received 5 votes, right, it's still a majority of council, but it's only when we get below 4 votes that those ones are kind of an afterthought at this point. And so if you took all of the consensus allocations and you took the starting point, right now we're $35,000 over. And so we had to trim back to get to our number of 172,000. So I believe right now we're at 207,000. And one other point I wanted to make to all of council is that in the past, I believe sometimes council has simply chosen to go with the arts jury, and they did not do their own allocations. But of course, council is free to do so, and some councillors did. So you'll see that the projects that were juried are the ones that are highlighted in that beige color, and you'll see that some of them have 7 votes, some have 5, and some have 6. Essentially, and some even have 4. Because there was not all councillors adopted the arts jury recommendation, but I did look, and I can tell you that in the consensus ones, meaning the ones that received 4 votes or more, all of the arts jury recommendations are included. So there's nothing that's actually been left out, right? So there are arts projects that may not have received all 7 council votes, but all of the projects that come from the arts jury that were recommended for funds are captured within the top 4 votes from council. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
And everybody knows that the starting point is the minimum amount that at least 4 of you have said you would fund, right? But you need, obviously, 4 votes to move that forward, right?
Yeah.
That's why we started there.
Okay. So before we get started, I'd like to hear if anyone's got some ideas on if you've got a brilliant way to shave off some dollars, then let's hear it. If not, yeah, Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, so
All
I
the
think,
ones you didn't vote for?
no. I just want to acknowledge it was hard last year because it was our first year and we didn't really know what we were going to be going through. I think this year it was very hard because it really felt to me like I was taking money away from the community rather than giving money to the community in some ways, even though, we are allocating money. There was just a lot of projects that in a normal year, I might have totally been behind funding, but for various reasons, wanting to make sure that this money goes out, quickly, that it's not sort of held over for next year. Projects that I thought money was more going to go out of our community rather than stay in our community were projects that I didn't necessarily consider. So I just want to say that I think from my perspective, it was a uniquely challenging year, and just because I or other councillors don't particularly support something this year, I think it's because we have to put the pandemic lens on it, and it doesn't mean that it's not something that we would potentially really enthusiastically encourage in a different year.
Thank you, Councillor, and well said. What I think we should do is start with the ones that have 4 votes, and we'll see how far that gets us, and then we'll just work our way up from there. So what I think we did last year, Councillor Page, you can refresh my memory. I think we went through them one line by line,
Yes.
and then sort of talked about them and moved on. Okay, so let's start from the top. The first 4 vote one that I've got is the Corazon Youth Choir Retreat. Our starting point is $343. Their initial ask was $1,000. Any comments on that?
So just to be clear,
Mayor Dooley.
that was a recommendation from,
That's correct, from the arts jury.
oh, when it says $343 under the name, for instance, Councillor Page, it doesn't mean that that's what he allocated, right? That's the recommended number that came
Right.
from.
Okay,
I know-
thanks for that clarification.
But just to clarify,
Rick.
4 councillors did allocate 343.
Oh, that's fine.
Regardless of whether it came from the arts jury or not.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. So, Rick, we can start with the 4s, but I just want to just remind everybody that when we did this, that there was that $6,000 that the arts community didn't get put in this year, because when we got the number late, they were 6,000 that they didn't get to allocate. So what I'd like to see us do is start below the section that they had allocations in, if that's at all possible, because we're already, to a certain extent, allocating money that they might have had, might not have changed our votes. But could we start with group 2 as opposed to starting with group 1? And if we still can't get, by looking at all the 4s and the 5 of group 2 and down, we can't find the 35,000, then we'll go back up, look at the arts community. Just,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying? Because they did miss out on the chats, because we got that information so late that we couldn't have them try to meet to also spend another $6,000.
That sounds good to me. Councillor Page, then Mayor Dooley.
Point of order, I think that maybe turn off the mics or something. We're getting some weird feedback. So let's try that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, quickly, when I went through this, one of the things is I wanted to try and spread out and get as many of the projects going as possible. And I'm not going to, there's 2 perfect examples here that I'm not going to name, but they're both over $35,000, which includes a fair amount of equipment purchase coming from outside. We're not going to be building these things locally, I'd imagine. And we may, not necessarily, but we may want to start with the big asks, because there may be a potential that you knock one of those out because it can just wait another year or 2. It doesn't need to happen this year, and you still are activating the rest of these groups. If we pick all the small ones, we might be here all night stroking off one project after another.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe delaying one of these big ones to another year lets the money flow to more people.
That makes a lot of sense. At least, I agree with you. And on top of that, I think at least starting with the 4s that are big numbers and having a discussion around those makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mayor Dooley?
Well, there was, and I think Joy can probably help a little bit with this, but I think I found 2 in group 2. I had a couple of points to make, so just bear with me. And one was the Capitol Theatre Restoration Society is under group 2. I would have thought that would have been under group 1. And I'm scrambling here to find the second one, but it may have been the Civic Theatre.
There was a dance one that I was questioning.
Yeah, or I'm not sure what it was, but there was 2 that I thought outside of their category. So, and the other point I wanted to make is, having done this a number of times, when you start at the top and you work your way down, you may end up with somebody on the last page, and the money's gone, right? So
No, fair enough.
you gotta watch that starting at, say you started group 2, number 1, by the time you get to number 15, you could have allocated that funds, and you'd find that beyond that, there's somebody just as worthy as the first group, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you get bias.
So I'd like to hear from Joy, if you don't mind.
Maybe I can start, because Joey and I have this conversation every year.
Yeah. And I had a couple more, Kevin, so.
Just on that one, what I say to them is, yes, it's really easy to say, this is arts, but it's economic, or it's arts and it's something else, or vice versa. So my advice to them is, if you think it's important from a arts perspective, then you better look at it and make a recommendation on that, because council may choose not to consider it at all. So really, when they decide not to look at those and punt them into the regular thing, then they still have definitely an arts component to them. But for whatever reason, and I think partly they have so much money and they kind of narrow it to, arts, maybe ones that are strictly arts, but anything that we do obviously has some type of economic spin-off, if it's a concert or whatever, an event or something. So that's, Joy,
Yeah,
you can add to that one, but that's, it's
I can
hard
just
to say one, it's not black and white.
Yeah, it's definitely not, and I can add to that. So both of those applications, the Civic Theater and the Capitol Theater, only marked the economic box on the application too. So they were asking to be strictly considered not within the arts category, but within the economic category, which is also a good thing, because if we had, a $35,000 ask within a $36,000 pot of money, there's simply no way we could consider it.
So part of that 6,000, in my mind, is certainly captured in those type of projects that clearly have an arts component to it. So I wouldn't feel too bad that they didn't allocate the 6.
Okay, well then,
Just wanted to, and then,
go ahead.
and Joy, you might be able to answer this one also. At least one of them anyway, if not two of them. One of the challenges that I find at times when I do this is when we have an application. An example would be the West Kootenay Regional Arts Council applies for 5,000 to us and 0 to the regional partners, as an example, right? And when I see a bannerhead saying West Kootenay whatever, or regional whatever, I would hope that that group would be looking regionally. And an example is Central Kootenay Invasive Weeds Society, and they have 0 application to the regional partners, and that also applied to even a couple that are our own projects, Nelson Electric Tramway and Sissendi. Now, and then you move further down the list and you go to Nelson Market Fest as an example, and the local farmers market from the West Kootenay Eco Society, and neither one of them applied regionally either. And I would have thought that at the very least, the Market Fest, I could balance that a little bit. The vibrant local market for farmers, I would have guessed that should have been covered by a.
Yes, and I can speak to that as well. So within the jury evaluation matrix that each juror is given, that is actually a specific point that they're asked to consider whether, if the project is a regional project, are they asking funds from other regions? And if they're not, then they are marked down for that. So that is definitely a consideration and was a big point of discussion, within the group too. I mean, I don't think that the West Kootenay Regional Arts Council was not awarded full funding, and that would have been one of the marks against it in terms of their score.
Okay, thank you.
If I could follow up, please? if you
Yeah,
don't
sure you
mind.
can.
So that, therefore, starting from the top, working down for me only, it doesn't work. I think we need to come up with a different system and start
Yeah.
work from the top down,
And
because,
I think what we're gonna do is go after the 4s and then the biggest 4s first, which in my read is on the last page. So I think we've got that approach. So
I just
second
want to
last.
add the other piece, which when you're talking to your regional directors, democracy is one of the big reasons, and Joy probably hears that from her, that people don't apply to some of those areas because they it's hard to, either you have to be in that community rallying for your project, or, the local person comes out and puts a bunch of dots on their favorite project. So dotmocracy is challenging that way. Or you get, $10 of your $500 project, and what do you do with $10?
Right. So then what I'd like to see, if we start with number 21, that, on my read, that's the 4, and it's a big number. Do we have any comments on 21? It's the Nelson Civic Theater Society.
So this is for the one to do the economic outreach coordinator.
Yeah.
As well as a website. They'd asked for this last year too. But I think they've rounded it out with a bit more staff, that outreach.
If I may, so I think what's interesting with this one is they're asking for 22, and 4 of us gave them almost exactly the same amount of 10,000, with 3 people not putting anything. So I think that this.
Sorry, Brittany, I'm not sure which one you're on. I didn't hear.
21.
Number 21,
Oh,
John.
okay.
Nelson Civic
Theater
Theater
Society.
Society.
Yeah. So, I think that this one actually could support our resiliency, maybe more than some of the other ones, especially during sort of this, as we move into a current COVID or post-COVID era. So that would be just something that I think we should keep in mind.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments about 21? So your proposal is to hold the line at 10,000?
I would hold the line at 10,000.
Any other thoughts on that one? Okay, this is gonna take longer than
That's just gonna be easy.
The more you ask any more thoughts, the longer it's gonna take.
Yeah. Okay, well, the next number I had circled in the 4s was a little bit above number 19. Nelson at its Best Society was looking for 10,000. We've got 4 people giving them 5,000 on average, or at least that's the starting point.
And sorry, I didn't look at the specifics. All I do know is that we recently received a grant for $25,000. Is it related to that at all?
I don't believe it's related to the same project. As far as I know, I am aware of the funding that you're talking about. I do think they're separate.
Okay.
CAO.
So we don't have any thoughts about Nelson at its Best?
So for this particular project, this is, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the roundtables that Nelson at its Best has been running, in terms of, we've attended a fair number of them as council.
Yeah, the Nest
The
Labs.
community engagements, the facilitated processes, and I believe they're asking to continue to run that kind of programming.
I think some of that will be covered off in that program. They're going out to consult with. There's definitely a big consultation piece of that project, and I'll try to find the.
Okay, well
They
Kevin
also
is,
list here that the calculation of Nelson's 2020 living wage, which they've been doing for a number of years, I know we use it as a guiding post in our company. Take a stock and compile a list of the initiatives to reduce poverty and interacting with people, so they've been bringing lists together.
Yeah.
I think this is a continuation of the work they've asked for before.
okay, well, thank you for that. You know what, maybe I'll add another sort of decision matrix or decision metric to this matrix, which is,
Rick?
yep. Oh, does, Janice, just give me a second here. I'll just say this and then I'll go right to, which is, maybe we should consider one of the frames is resilience. We've been talking a lot about the importance of the economic recovery and our recovery too. Just maybe we'll keep that in mind as we go through it. Does this sort of advance that?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, great. Thanks. Councilor Morrison.
I did hear what the mayor said about not starting at the top and going to the bottom, but we're not really starting at the top if we start at the top of this page at number 1, because we're looking at all the 4s. And if you look down the column, we do a 4, and then there's a whole bunch that don't fit as 4s. It's just, instead of, because I'm not in the room, it's a little bit weird for me to go to 21 and then to 19 as we look for 4s. Let's look for 4s, and there might be something that's quite obvious, because I'm sort of thinking that on 19, we kind of got to hold the line here again. But maybe there are some fours where people are willing to say, yeah, toss that one out with the bathwater or whatever. But let's do the fours, but let's start at the top of the page so we can follow this along and not be jumping from page 1 to page 2 to page 3.
So top
if
of
you don't-
group 2?
But the
So
Excel
starting at the
sheet
top,
up is different than our page.
Yeah.
And just start there, and if you don't mind, just go and do the fours, because it's not gonna end up that we get to the bottom of the page and we've run out of money.
Okay, so Councillor Morrison, just to be clear, are you basing off of what's on screen, on your screen? The spreadsheet on your screen, or do you have a copy of what we're looking at here, which has the,
I have a copy of whatever, you can confirm with Gabe there in the room, what it is I'm looking at, because I've got the spreadsheet that has everybody's
Okay.
money on it.
you're on the same as us? I'm okay with that, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so
Because
the,
it's not like we're not doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're doing 1, and then we're gonna go to the next one that's a 4, was actually 19. Like,
yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good.
sure. I was just looking for the big numbers, but that's fine. There's not that many to work from. So we've got number one, $100. We've got, who can speak to that? How about we go to Councillor Morrison? Can you make the case for number one?
my case for number 1 would be just the case that you brought up about resiliency, and I think that this is a small little group, and they're asking for $100, and I didn't see that, and that most of their money is actually, they've done what we've asked everybody, they've gone to their local areas and asked for bigger sums if you looked at how it was broken down. So I would say that would be a reason to keep the $100 there.
Any,
I'll second that.
yeah?
Yeah.
And I'm looking for somebody who kind of, okay, well then that bumps it to a 5, so I think we're keeping that one.
Okay.
Next is 19, as you said, talking about, no, 20. 19, that's the one we were talking about. Nelson, it's best. Kevin, have you got any new information on that?
Just trying to find the proposal.
Okay, well then we'll come back to that one. We'll move.
And, sorry, Gabe reminded me, it has to be held in confidence till June 5th, so I'll have to. Joey? Is this streaming or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry, UBCM.
Okay.
Joking, everyone's confused. No one knows what's happened. Let's go to line 19.
Line 20.
Okay. Or
We're
20.
talking about the Nelson Baseball Association QE pitching mound.
Can I say one thing if I may?
Yep.
Okay. And again, they are also kind of, they may be under embargo, but they've been very successful in getting some of their other applications in from all kinds of areas other than the city. And so the only thing I would say to you is that you should probably be supportive of the city to be in there, but just, I understand you guys are under pressure for certain things, but just recognizing
Okay.
that is the case.
Is this
Thank
one
you.
regionally being funded?
No,
Yes.
it doesn't look like.
Well, I'm sorry, yeah.
Not through CIP, but elsewhere.
No.
Elsewhere. Okay. Well, that's good information. So, Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Renwick.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to bring up is it didn't request any SIP funding, so maybe they are getting it from other sources.
They were successful in getting, and again, this one is out there,
Speak someplace.
they got about, I think, 50 from the RDC.
Okay, that makes a huge difference.
Councillor
Yeah, just to add on Colin's words, if you haven't been by Queen Elizabeth Ballpark, drive by. They've done a fantastic job. I know that they've gone and got some funding from the RD and Lions. Absolutely, I think Nelson Baseball has done a fantastic job. Part of my criteria for either selecting or not was, with COVID, will they be playing baseball? But this particular project being a bullpen, you don't, like, there's a pitcher and a catcher, and you're 60 or 90 feet apart, and you can do that without playing baseball. You can go down there and use it, and it's not just like, two people can use it, and then two more, and two more, and two more. Same with the batting cage. So in one sense, if you can't play baseball, but you can still kind of practice, and they say they've done a great job, and that's why I was supporting it.
I drove by there yesterday and there was a full team. They were all distant, but there was a guy on the pitching mound and there were people on all bases, so.
Yeah, so I was one of the people that didn't put any funding towards this, but I would like to see funding, considering that they did get a lot from the RDCK, and as Councillor Renwick pointed out, that people, this is something that people will be able to do over the next little while.
And to be clear, you're saying it's for a bullpen and a but I'm seeing here it's a pitching mound.
So, yeah, so just if I can, I apologize. They have, and one of the things, just to Councilor Renwick's comments, is that the Nelson Basin Baseball Association has shut down their season. So
Okay.
they were there, but this is an opportunity to do a massive amount of work to be going on there, and this is, again, a very small kind of proportion that's coming from the city. They have done very well on going to all other sources for, again, an asset that does, in the end, belong to the city, but
Yeah.
so just letting you
Okay.
know that. So it's one of the things, the reasons they're trying to do this and get this funding is because they've shut down the season, so now they can go in and do this work while, because there won't be any baseball. Although I'm not sure about the team being there, but again, kids aren't in school, so I don't know if they have their hats.
So
and
young adults,
uniforms.
not uniforms.
Okay, well, thanks for that. So I'm not hearing any shaving on this one. Okay.
Keep going.
This is,
I think we're gonna have to, I think we're gonna
Just
have to call a vote on these. And we'll probably have to return to it after we get through and discover we haven't found enough money, but do we, I guess, all in favor of keeping the 2,500? John, are you with us on this one?
Sorry?
We're just gonna vote on these ones, so
Oh, yeah,
I'm saying all in
okay,
favor,
yeah, no
on the
problem.
pitch round? Yep.
Just looking down
Okay.
the list here.
So the next one that I'm seeing is we're back to the Nelson Civic Theater Society. That's the 10,000, is that right? 21. Okay, does anybody want to make a case for that? I think Councillor Page, would you like to make a?
Well, I think, again, they've asked for it last year, and I see a fleshed out application for research and development along the lines of figuring out how to fatten up and thicken this industry and bring more of that work to the Kootenays. I like the angle of doing that research and bringing out some of that staff support, so I see jobs within that work, and it could pay big dividends. So definitely where we're settled at the moment, the 10,000, I think, is enough to get them forward on some of that work.
Yeah, it's certainly not what they asked for, the 22. Mayor Dooley, do you have a response to that?
I'd be interested to know, one of the reasons I was concerned about this particular one is because I actually think there may be a whole new direction happening in the cinema industry, period. And a lot of what I'm reading about and listening to is that there's a shift happening. I think there was one of the chains just closed down completely this week. It, offers up movies as they have in the past, but those days may be gone. And I'm just wondering if these kinds of studies would take into account, is there a shift, and would you adjust to that shift? Would this help you do that?
I think, I think just to clarify that, I think this is funding to develop the screen guild industry, not the theater, but the filmmakers.
So that's what I mean,
producers.
like, I'm just saying, would they be looking at, as an example, that maybe this is completely different?
Well, I think just to speak to this, I think they would, because I've talked to a few people about it, and Nelson does have quite a strong film-making community that they do great films. Ski films. And
That's true.
Mountain
bike
biking
films.
films.
It's about growing out that crew
Yeah.
capacity, and
Yeah.
that this is a destination to do
That can
your
be put on
filming and
live
bring your
stream, or
talent.
it can be live streamed. or
live
whatever,
streamed,
yeah.
and like we have,
It's about the theater,
yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
consumption of media. This
Yeah.
is about creation of content.
That's good. No, that's good.
Well, fair enough. Fair question.
Okay, so we've got a 10,000. Do we have any proposal to shave anything off of this 10K? We do need to get. No, nothing. So I'm just going to take that because we don't have to have a vote. We'll move on.
Councillor Wattenberg, I did find the proposal, and I
Okay.
sent it to all of council if you want to look at what that covers. I don't have what they applied for, but
And they received the funding.
yeah,
Okay.
maybe. I haven't heard that officially.
maybe.
Okay. So are you?
Your crystals kind of told you.
Tea leaves.
Expecting good news.
So Kevin, this is an argument for why this may not be necessary.
It might, I haven't seen their application, so I don't know. That's why I sent you this.
Okay.
There's you can see their application is a whole bunch of community planning work. That's all.
Right, so it's the community engagement, the roundtables they've been doing, so they wanna continue that. So we don't know if they've got the money. If they do get the money, they still may need this. If they don't get the money, this may be irrelevant. I'm not sure if this is, help us.
I think we have a strong indication that they might be successful in this application. that we just
Okay.
sent.
Okay. So potentially, we don't, this may not, the ask for, through the CIP might not be as necessary for the great work that they're doing.
I'm gonna interpret that is
Yeah.
what you're saying. Okay. So, do we have a proposal to deal with line, Nelson at its best? 19.
Can we,
I would suggest
Can we
we drop that one. based
can we
on-
just rest on this one for a
You
moment?
put a
Like,
question mark on
we're
this
just circling, we haven't really moved through the list yet, and I'd love to jump to like
I put a question. mark on that.
33 or,
I put a question mark on it,
put a question mark on it, yeah.
That's great.
and I'm gonna we're moving to 30.
Actually, wait a minute, there's 25?
Yeah.
You were chair last time.
That's fair.
Janice
Okay.
has her waving her hands.
But now I'm unsure.
Councillor Morrison, go ahead.
Sorry, as we're just going down, because it just like, I like following the numbers. I'm very linear when it comes to numbers. I just have a question to ask staff. And I know that on number 23, look at that, we had 7 votes, so we're not supposed to be getting rid of that. But I'm also wondering whether or not, and I believe Kevin could answer this, the CAO, is this not something, I know that Nelson Hydro has some sponsorship money in their budget for outstanding projects. And it's part of why I only put in for sort of half the amount, because I saw this as perhaps Nelson Hydro, who would of course be involved with this substation upgrade, could see their way to giving money out of their fund. I don't know what it's called.
Their Maintain Ancient Assets Fund, since the streetcar was
But they
how
have
started.
a fund for doing swag and stuff like that. I mean, is this not something that Nelson Hydro
Be known as
could
Hydro, though, that's
take on?
I don't recall what that budget is. It's, they've done, for example, I'm not sure what's happening at the rink this year. They've sponsored, they're one of a sponsoring group on the boards.
Ah.
$600 or something for that.
Yeah, so I don't, there's some of those things that may not happen. It's not a lot of money. I'm not sure if it's $5,000. They've sponsored the science fair in the past, as an example. Will a science fair go on? I don't know. Maybe under social distancing.
My understanding as well, if I may, is that the general manager is actually donating through time and expertise on assisting with the.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. It wasn't that I was asking for all of it to be covered by it either, but it was just, I was thinking maybe half. But if they're already in for something like this, then that's fine. Thank
So,
you.
just a point of clarification on this, actually, when I'm looking at the starting point, I thought the starting point was the lowest amount that someone put on here, but when I'm looking at the starting point, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people put the full amount. So is that why? Because if it's the tip after the 4, if the full amount was there, then that becomes the new starting point. Is that correct?
If you had 5 or 6 that
Yeah.
funded it, you would look at 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
4 is the starting.
4 people would put up their
Right.
hands for the 4,999.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So the answer to that is that we don't know about Nelson Hydro having budget to
I don't,
take. Probably
not that I'm aware of it, as
Okay.
Colin pointed out.
So-
We are providing technical expertise on this project.
I could send out.
That's fine.
Okay.
The one
Number
that, so can we go to another number now?
Yeah, 25, which is the next.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if is that gonna happen?
Well, that's why I put 0.
That-
How do you know that's
like-
gonna happen? I would say probably not.
Like I
Yeah.
put 0 there because I had no clarity around that. Like I have to hand it to the ones that withdrew,
Yeah.
that said we're not gonna do it.
And-
Like at the beginning of September, you have the Road Kings that's saying no. And here we have the winter kickoff.
And if you think about what happened, I mean, it was a whole bunch of people in a tight tent
Right.
Like, that's not gonna happen.
It came to my mind, I was at it, it was very tight.
Very tight, like
I don't know if
hundreds
we-
and hundreds and hundreds of people.
I don't know if we'd be there.
Okay, so I hear a proposal to eliminate that one.
Yeah.
And a second, all in favor? Okay, we got.
I have one that I'd like to, there was 5 votes, but I just want to bring it up if I may.
Sure, which one are you?
24.
Okay,
So I love the idea. I put no money there because I didn't think that it was needed this year.
It's
We
the,
don't need a sign.
Oh, see
I
what you're
love
saying.
it. I love the project. I think the society has done amazing things down there. I would love to see something like this next year. I would take money out for
I
that
have
one.
I had a big question mark beside that too. Counselor Page.
okay, I think that stood out for me on this one, and if council wants to go a different direction, I fully support that. It's a 125-year anniversary coming up, so this is more of a commemorative project, and I just want to be cognizant of that. And the work, the amount of outdoor space that people need to be using, like opening up that whole other side of the creek, I thought they've done some beautiful work. They're going to do some more. And so to kind of hit that 125-year anniversary, I was like, why not keep making that park look beautiful?
think
Okay,
it's-
so from the resilience lens, do we have a comment?
I would just say, you know, it's like, this is kind of a critical time in this town, and maybe we really need to think about like money in action.
Well, that would be,
I know, but I mean, I'm just saying it's, there's a difference between, it's basically infrastructure work and direct, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, there's infrastructure work and then there's direct action to the community.
Who does this work, by the way?
Which one are we talking about?
Isuzu
Isuzu
Society,
Friendship.
Garden
Actually,
Improvement.
it's part of the Market Plaza. It's part of the bigger plan for down there. It wasn't, it's not something they pulled out on their own. It was part of the overall
Like it's
landscape park
part of
for
the rail
Cottonwood Park, right, for the
it's
market.
building a low stone wall along the edge
It's
of the market
amazing.
oval. It's
And they do, they tend to do this work, and they tend to get donations in kind from
Yeah, it's
many of the
beautiful work.
local suppliers and
Absolutely.
stuff, so.
Yeah, okay, Joy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick note on that project too. I've been in touch with them, and part of their overall initiative is working with us to move those artifacts from the old Touchstones location, the ones that have to do with the Cottonwood Power Plant, and putting them within that landscaping and then doing informational plaques. So it's definitely valuable from our perspective.
Joy, the only one we got them, or I wrote that application, they won that Fortis Community Award Project or funding. Like, where's that at now? Cause that's, that work, you know, that's what they were supposed to use to do some of this work. You know, the,
Oh, I don't think they let me know about that.
I forget, is it 10,000?
Yeah.
Colin, do you remember? Mr. McClure? So, maybe, I'll try Blair quickly.
Okay, I'll put a question mark beside that one.
Okay.
Okay,
Can we jump to 30, the Nelson Senior Society?
What a
I'm just
question
gonna
I-
shoot myself now.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so we,
I hear Counselor Page has suggested we move to number 30.
You realize, guys, if we don't get past this
I know.
32,000, it's coming out of your wages.
It might be less painful.
Yeah, it might be less painful, right?
Counselor Page, on number 30, you've got a proposal.
Where are we now?
Number 30.
Number 30.
Oh, 30, okay.
Okay,
We're
what's,
running out of paper here.
okay, watch the death of a politician. When I look at the Nelson Seniors Citizen Association request here, there was multiple requests, which I read in as buying kitchen equipment, appliances, a few other items, and it did look to me like some of the work could happen this year, some of the work could happen next year. It could be spread out. It's a big ask for a lot of things, I think, in all at once. And I think we prompted them last year with a lot of discussion to come to this place and ask these questions. I'd like to see them ask for a more continual amount, maybe 10 or 15,000 a year, as opposed to 42,000 at once. We all gave them some support in quite a lot of it, but maybe if we stuck it more around 15 or 20, they could do some of their work and do some more of it next year and do some more of it next year, as opposed to it all being done this year. And I think a lot of it, commercial kitchen
I
purchases,
think they
that's
could
gonna
manage
be a
that
lot of
because,
stuff from China.
I think they could, I think that'll be very manageable, because they did talk to me, and I suggested they apply for one of these grants. To be honest with you, I didn't really think they'd apply for that much, but, I think they'd be open to that for sure. I think that'd be reasonable.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of like purchasing the kitchen equipment and things like that. As a person who is in the middle of a renovation right now, sometimes these things you want to get in and you want to get them done, because otherwise it puts you you're in a scenario where it's not workable for a really long time. And if you have been in that facility, it really needs that renovation badly.
What if we did 10,000 less?
Shower.
And that would get them going? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Cal.
No,
I was just saying, you know, it is a big ask.
Janice has her hand up.
So I'm just, maybe we took 10,000 off, that would go to what we were trying to cut down, and they still would get a good chunk, and they could still get going.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to see us give them the amount. I would agree with Councillor Anderson's comments. That facility is in need of repair. It's a well-used facility, and you know, I just have a soft spot for that spot, and the seniors. I go, you know, every time I drive by there, they're in there playing card. Like there's always something going on there, and quite honestly, it's you know, I can't use the word I want to use around the table, but it's a bit of a dive in there.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those people, we need to do this for them.
Yeah.
Really do. And you know what? You're right. You start a renovation. You get there. You know, the number isn't quite there, so they're probably going to be scrambling for about $2,500 anyways. So that's my 2 cents.
Councillor Morrison?
So I just have sort of more of a global question in terms of the fact of this space in the Civic Center. This poor building has all of these asks that are coming on it. So we've got an ask here, we've got an ask for gymnastics, we've got an ask. I'm just trying to figure out, is this, are we obligated in perpetuity to have the seniors center right there? Has there ever been any discussions about having the senior center somewhere else or attached to something else? And those are some of the questions in my mind when I was looking at putting this in there, because I'm still unclear as to what the public in general feels about the Civic Center building in its totality. So I know that there's some obligation, and perhaps the city manager could clarify that again, that the senior center is mandated by a provincial decree that came out many, many years ago. But that was why I put down the number that I have in there. And I can be swayed any direction on this vote.
Okay, well, we have a proposal on the floor. We'll start with the Councillor Page's, I think, or no, Councillor Woodward was suggesting 28,000. And then Councillor Page, you're suggesting that it could be the full amount just over a couple of years.
Well, we wouldn't be able to spread this out over years.
But I mean, like,
I think now that they know to come here, now that we got to ask,
Yeah.
I think with Councillor Woodward saying, let's bring it down to 28,000. I think that allows them to chew off some of this kitchen upgrade. And I would say come back next year and ask for another 28,000.
So you need to convince Councillor Anderson, Mayor Dooley, Councillor Renwick.
You can only put the merit of the idea out
support
there
that.
and let it take root.
Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder. Do we, for Councillor Woodward's proposal of 28,000?
28,000.
28,000, yep. All in favor, or any more discussion on that? All in favor? Oh, do you want to?
I'd like to speak against it, because I'm not opposed to the concept of phased-in project there, but at the same time, we're not finished with the group here, and I think there's a few
Why don't you
others.
just put 10,000 as a possibility at this stage?
There's a few others we could look at here as well.
Yeah.
Sure, fair enough.
Right,
That's a good
so-
point. So we'll put 10,000 as a possibility, and we'll come back to this one if we
Right,
need
we're
to.
gonna approve the whole list.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good
Just tell
point.
the RD,
So Gabe,
couldn't
can you
make
hand,
good decisions, you just went for the whole thing.
you got that? Okay, so we're gonna move then,
Thought you should have asked the RD for some money, and can you fund the difference?
I like it. Okay, so where does that leave us? We've got 14,750 from Rotary.
This is,
Number 33.
okay, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Now, for me, I mean, Rotary has done so many amazing things in our community and around the world, and I think that they would do an awesome job up at Rosemont Park. For me, this year, this was not a need. It's in a space where there's already activities for children. It's also close to a school where there's a playground. You know, I would like to see this move forward. I just think with all of the other competing needs in our community this year, to me, this isn't the top priority. And, you know, this isn't that I completely support the project, just in this situation in particular, I would like to see that money having a bigger impact in another place.
Okay, so we have
That's why you guys
a
put
mover and
zero.
a seconder on that. I'm just we'll call that a mover and a seconder.
Perfect.
Okay, any discussion?
I can
on-
just tell you,
The move is to eliminate, it's to go to
Yeah.
zero on this one.
yeah, I can tell you they are looking at sourcing it locally. They're not looking at a purchased playground from somewhere else. They're looking at, there's one in the cusp that was built by a wood maker or a timber framer or something there. That's really what they're looking at.
Because this is the wilderness park with the big logs and
Yeah,
the things you can move around and build
Yeah.
a semi-fort.
Yeah, so it is local.
Councillor Woodward.
I would just say that, you know, as we stand right now, in this moment, playgrounds are closed. We don't know when they're gonna
Well,
open again.
They will.
They will open.
That's coming down tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna say that can't
So
be
it's
used.
really all the people that put zero in here are, so it really is those that actually put money in here that probably should.
Yeah, so I would say to
So it's
Mayor
yourself.
Dooley and Janice, do you want to speak in favor of this?
Well,
Me too, obviously, but
one of the reason I support this project is because they've come a long way with it already. And I think this would get them over the hump. And secondly, I've always felt, and one of the reasons I was really behind the location for the skate park was that Rosemont area has been underserved for years for recreation facilities, especially for young people. And it's only in the last few years that we've got the skateboard park in there, cleaned up the Rosemont Park to the point where the young folks can bike in it. The Frisbee group are in the park as well. And now this thing would actually be the completion of that whole piece. There'd be nothing left hanging. Now, I'm negotiable on the number, to be honest with you, but I really think we should help them get this thing done and get it over with.
yeah.
And I think they have a number of private companies that have already stepped up, like SPL, and I know that some of the lumber companies have stepped up with them as well, so.
Councillor Page.
But, you know, I'm open, I'm just saying that particular area of our community.
I just wanna, yeah, I don't wanna add to what the mayor's saying, but just reminding council of what's in the package. They've already raised $42,000. They're on the path towards $100,000. I think for the phase one, they've got a ways to go anyway. The $25,000 is not gonna get them there. $15,000 will move them the majority of the way they want to go with this, so I think it'll get them over at least the 50% mark and show our support.
Okay, so we have a proposal to go to zero. We'll do a vote on that, and then we'll see where we stand and come back to that. Unless you want to amend it, you can call it a friendly amendment. Nope, you want to vote on it. Okay, so all in favor of zero on this one? Okay, that failed.
They didn't convince you guys.
Councilor Page, would you like to make a 1475?
5,000.
5,000.
5,000.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments on 5,000? Discussion?
Well, yeah, if you're gonna give them 5, why wouldn't you give them 10?
Fine,
Come
10,
on.
10.
Come on. And I'm the zero guy.
The difference, 750. 7,500.
Well, sorry, but if you're gonna give them 5, you might as well give them nothing. Really, in the grand
Exactly.
scheme of things, what's $5 grand gonna do?
Exactly. Then the project won't happen this year.
So
Wow.
your proposal originally was 15.
They have to get
The
up.
original,
They have to get up to 100,000 before phase 1 kicks in, is what I'm reading here.
Yeah, they're not gonna do it this year.
You guys, we're gonna have to make some cuts here.
okay,
mean, we're
so,
not,
so
Have,
you're saying 5? Do you want to stick to that?
25 and 10, which they originally are after, they get 35, like they're a fair way towards the $100,000 with the original amount. I know the Rotary clubs, Janice is a member. I know what they're like. They'll take whatever they get and they'll just keep on plugging. But they've been working on this for a long time.
Well, 7,500 would put them over 50,000 by $30.
Yeah.
So let's put them over 50,000.
And you second that?
Sure, yeah.
Well, that's, so now, I think we should look at the number on the board. Right?
Yeah,
This
we're
like
not even-
this like a show, right?
Started with the-
So if you're gonna knock 20,000 off these folks here,
Well, no.
We're actually only
15.
gonna knock
Let's update
6.
the board.
We're only gonna knock, because we're starting with 14.75. The proposal is 75, so it's only seven grand.
Move this.
It moves us though, it's good. Let's take what we can get.
Put a question mark.
$7,500 isn't
really,
anything
really
to
bad.
Cal, but like, some of us live off that for you.
Why don't you, again, put 7,500 as a question mark and
Yeah,
see what they
exactly.
are.
Put it as a
Okay, got
question.
7,500 there.
If I may, Chair,
Yep.
just, General Manager Love did, text me back and he said that, he couldn't cover that full 5, maybe 1. He says that he's donated about, personal time engineering to about 5K.
Already.
This is to,
Is this a deal breaker? Like if they don't get the money, it doesn't, like, does the tramway just not run this year or?
I don't know, it's a good
It's
question.
like, pay me now or pay me later, and later's probably way more expensive than now.
Oh,
well, excuse me, but, like, isn't this a done deal? We all voted for it, and it's,
Yeah.
this is,
It was just a question that came
Was
out
it-
whether or not we could cover it inside,
Okay.
Hydro's, donation budget, and they don't have the capacity.
okay. So we've got number 38, which is a 4. It's only
we gonna-
$1,000 bucks.
Are we going to finish with Rosemont?
We put a question
Update the
mark on
number?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You put a question.
So we're getting there if we just sort of vote on all the question marks and so we're,
Yeah.
But there may be a couple more.
Do you mean 36?
I mean 36, yes I do. The Red Cross Society, okay. That's only 1,500. Do we have any proposals from, wait a second. Give them the whole amount. Janice, do you want to speak to this? This is kind of a,
I love this chair, just putting you on the spot.
Thanks.
That's great.
Thanks. Anyways, so this is how people of all walks of life get equipment. There's no means test for this. So I spend a lot of time every day trying to get equipment for patients that are being discharged or some of my home clients. And this is one source that they get them at. And the whole thing here, this is about this bariatric equipment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tough to say, but nobody's getting any thinner. And we need this equipment. And I can tell you that we don't have it as inventory. Like I have a lot of equipment to use on the ward. I have very little bariatric equipment. The hospital has one bariatric bed. So when these people have to then leave us and then go out to the community, they need the support. And that's why I actually gave them what they asked for, the full amount, because this equipment is also really expensive. Just something as simple as a regular frame walker that costs about $100 for an average person. The minute you make it a bariatric one, it's sometimes almost doubling the cost for these agencies to buy that equipment. So
And the weight
that's
threshold is
why
not high.
that's why I put in the full amount. I'm either here nor there, but I can tell you that there is a great shortage If this had been an ask for just equipment, I would have kind of went like, yeah, maybe they can find it some other way. It's an organization completely run by volunteers, but it's the bariatric equipment. It's such a shortage in our area.
Okay.
And may I?
Yep.
And we're talking about equipment that helps people like that are over 250 pounds. That's a lot of people. That is not, there's a lot of people that need this equipment. You know, it's not we're not getting into sort of a really crazy number. I think that's just something to, if you like football, support this. Skiing. There you go.
Okay, does anybody want to, Councillor Page, you're on the other side of this.
We gotta get lots of that equipment on there. I'm not getting or skinnier.
Okay.
You didn't put any money towards it.
Okay, so we have no proposal to change that number, I'm hearing.
And they did go to the other thing is to keep in mind here is they did go to the region to ask for money as well. So they've gone out to the region because they serve the region.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna suggest we go back to group 1.
Wait, the Kootenai Swim Club, we're not done yet.
Oh, sorry.
You have more fours.
Line 38.
Oh, line 38, the swim club, $1,000. Brittany, do you want to?
Again, in a normal year, I would be happy to give this. When I spoke with basically looking at the pool, it's not going to open.
Yeah.
It is one of the hardest things to have open. The sanitation in that facility, particularly around the pool, it's just very, very challenging to manage. Vancouver did put something out like how to reopen pools, but actually it was how to reopen pools for a very few limited number of people. So it would be like saying, we could have the pool open and you can have one person in the lap lane. We're not going to open the pool for something like that.
Second, we're not opening the pool.
We're not opening the pool. I don't think we need that funding for this year.
Second, all in favor?
I can be swayed.
0. We got one, no question mark.
$1,000.
We're taking your word the pool's not open.
Yeah, I do not think it's
for sure
gonna
not
open.
until
Gabe,
July
you got
1st.
that? Awesome. Okay, we're gonna return to group 1.
Okay.
31.
Group,
that's in here.
Oh,
Group 1, we've
the
got,
arts and culture?
yeah.
So
I think
we still have 4s left on this page.
Oh,
Do we?
Well, we have the West Kootenai Eco Society, there's a 4 there.
I don't see
5.
that on mine.
Kootenai Lake Tourism, that's,
Which number, John?
41, is that not a 4 or is it 5?
5.
That's a 5.
And
But you're right.
that is the one we might be able to, we don't know at this stage, so.
So that one's another question mark.
So I should put a question mark beside that one?
Well, I think it should be, for sure,
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Market
that's-
Fest, were we pulling that one as well? Because that one's
That's
probably not.
That's a 2.
2. Didn't even put it in.
It's not on the thing.
oh, it's not on the new one.
There's 0
Yeah,
allocated against it because
42 is,
only 2 people wanted to support that.
Right.
so John, that was
Okay,
41
it's gone.
is,
I've got it. Thank you. Thanks
You got
very
it?
much. Thank you.
Yeah, because that's,
okay, so that,
Mayor Lockenberg, if I may, just one thing, when you talk about group 1 versus the other groups, I mean, in my mind, group 1 is the arts and culture.
Yeah.
I do see that you went through the 4 votes here.
yeah.
But there's a lot of group 2 that is in the other categories that we didn't touch upon, so I just wanted to bring that to your
Yep.
attention. If you want to jump to group 1, that's fine, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah, I think given how far we are from our number, we've done all the 4s in group 2. Doesn't it
Yeah.
make sense we go to group 1?
Yeah.
And
Joyce.
Joy's saying, hi Joy.
go there.
Go ahead, Joy.
Just to step in, so the concept behind bringing in the external jury for the arts, culture, and heritage applications was not to then have the revisited and revoted on by
Yeah.
council.
I have to agree with Joy there because.
I have to agree with that too.
I mean, the reason it's here in the first place. Now, having said that, Joy, we can overrule some of those decisions, or we can adjust them if we feel comfortable enough that it's in the best interest of everybody involved. But the reason that they are where they are in the first place is that allocation was put to the arts community to be critiqued by the arts community, to be brought back to us for ratification. But we do have the option to change it, so if you wish to go there, I think that's fair enough, but just keep that in mind. I personally,
Yes, absolutely.
sorry,
You do have that option, but I would just like to stress that these volunteers put in many, many hours, you know, to go
Yeah.
through all
No, I
and
hear
evaluate.
that. I hear that, Joy. We're just about 30,000 that we're having trouble getting to. So
Well,
I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go to 5.
so through the chair, could I
Let's go to the
ask,
5.
Oh,
yeah, could I ask for,
Sure.
could I ask that we have a bit of a balance on what the question marks are and where we're at? And
Sure.
should the question marks be,
Voted on.
Why I wanted to go to the
Yeah,
big
let's
one.
Let's look at the,
because we might be looking for $2,000 here.
Sure. Yeah.
We don't know, right? So,
I think that was part of the comment I was making, Chair Lachtenberg, was simply that,
Yeah.
you know, for example, you did jump to number 30, which is, it did receive 7 votes. That was one of your questionables. My only thought was that before you jump to look to cut from the arts and culture group, you might also want to explore
Exactly.
some of the items that received 7 and 6 votes, because there are
Yeah.
big money items there as well. That was the only thing I was pointing out with regards to process.
Fair enough.
With regards to the ones that you guys have identified as questionable, we did have number 30, which was the seniors community hall. That was you guys were looking at a potential $10,000 drop. We also had number 19, which was Nelson at his best, a potential $5,000 drop. That was in the group of 4 votes. Also in that group was number 33, which I believe was the Rosemont multi-generational park project. We were looking at a potential $7,500 drop, and I believe also there was
7,500 or 85.
Tourism.
So assuming
tourism. We did get a vote on, Councillor Morrison. Tourism was the NKLT. I believe there was a vote, and
Yeah.
it was to cut it from 3,000 to 0.
Yeah.
So the number that we have
Is
up
the
on the
3,000
screen now does
reflects
reflect that.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're about 7,500, but that's for the question marks. Councillor Anderson, did you want to?
yeah, I just want to point out too, from the arts community, the discrepancy is right now is 4,343, and that wasn't included that $6,000, correct? So there is that discrepancy there. So technically, we probably would have approved all of those ones that are in that 4 range. And so we're actually probably funding arts less this year than we have in other years because there was that extra whatever, I can't remember, so it was like an extra $6,000 that should have been allocated to them. So therefore, and the number's actually low, it's within that, so we should probably consider all of those funded.
I hear you on that. My question
Are
was
they
this,
all gonna go?
was exactly that. Is a lot of these, Joy, are festivals, and I was under the understanding that this adjudication happened kind of before. So we're kind of
No, the adjudication only happened last week, like last Thursday. And I like how Dave said it not very long ago when he said that we like to view things with the pandemic lens.
Yeah.
That's definitely how we did it too. And the applicants had the chance to give updates on their projects would change. So a lot of them are moving to more online platforms, etc. So if they're not moving ahead in the typical form, the jury did consider that carefully.
Great. Thank you for that,
And
Councillor.
where it was going.
Great. Thanks, Joy. Councillor Morrison.
Oh, Councillor Anderson said what I said earlier, and that is the fact that the group 1, the arts, culture, and heritage already have missed out on money. I just want to speak to what I did in my matrix, is that they had asked for 2 of the proponents to actually, if there was more money to be had, and I thought, well, they had $600 that they didn't get to use. So there was $1,500 that was an additional ask. So I actually topped up those things in my matrix. I think that we shouldn't be touching this because they still, even with that, still had about $4,500 to go. And I appreciate that I had heard earlier in the week that there was some things about, well, these programs aren't going to go. I want to thank the CDC and the team that they picked and the comprehensive report they gave, because not only did they put in their assignments of the money, but I read the full report and it talked about how some of these ones, like how do you have a music festival if you can't have people in the room, that they explained what was going to happen. And I really appreciate the background as to why you were still funding, why you weren't funding. And I appreciate that. So I can say that we might get there and we might take something out of Group 1, but I will be voting against any movement to change the allocations in Group 1.
Yeah, if you're, I would support Janice on that. I think,
Yeah,
again,
that sounds good to me. Okay, so going on to Group 2
Can
then.
I maybe just make a suggestion?
Sure.
Done the math, I think you're down to 1622, depending on that 7,000 for the markets.
Okay.
So I think what you're looking at is what is Plan B cuts now, almost, right? So if you want to end up funding the market, what wouldn't you fund to $7,000?
Sure. Okay.
Instead of, so you need to find about 1,600 more of
And then
definite
and then
cuts,
it's
and then
Plan B
and
would
then
be
maybe
7,000.
Plan B of if we need to spend that money on the markets, what would I reduce? So it
Okay.
may or may not happen.
Okay, great. Then we've got, if we're gonna continue with the numbers, then we're into 5s. So the first one is number 2, Councilor Morrison?
Sorry, I'm just as we're trying to get through this, I mean, we have to go back to the 5s, but I just want to go to line item 5 and line item 6. And in terms of the Kootenai invasive species, if we're looking for some monetary cuts, and I'm sure people will have some comments on this, I just want to remind people that I was kind of consistently low on both of those. And it's probably because I was thinking in my mind, is in my notes here I have, is that we have funded as the city out of the regional district S100 portfolio, our general administration portfolio, there was $10,000 that was put into the budget this year for CKIS. So we are also, through that $10,000, we are, as the city, contributing some money already to this organization. So I just wanted the people to be aware that that was a budget item, and that stayed in. That was not removed when the RD.
Okay. Do we have any comments, any other so, Councilor Morrison, are you proposing something? Are you proposing cutting?
I was thinking that perhaps in the number 6 could be like 4,000 is the number there. Maybe it could be 2,000 on line 6.
Can somebody explain what the Eco Garden plant list is again?
So what I remember from this proposal is they want to provide pamphlets and research and a resource on what you can plant instead of, like, because one of the biggest problems, you go to dioramas, you go to a garden store, you buy a beautiful tree, you plant it, suddenly you've got knotweed all over your lawn because it's not the right species, it's not what you should be planting, it doesn't support local native plants.
It's a very bad example, but we understand what you mean.
That was painful.
Is this something that's not going to happen if this is not funded fully? Does anybody know that question? It seems like it's probably got flex in it, right? You print it on the printer as opposed to make a nice brochure.
Educate Diorama and the other ones.
Exactly.
Because I'm not looking on the website to see if it's the right thing. I'm
Right.
gonna trust the person from Diorama that tells me.
Well,
that
and I
it's
think it would be a pamphlet you would have at Diorama, and you'd be like, okay, what am I planting for bees? What am I it's a list of native species to plant.
Well, and I think there's definitely probably some players in our region that are better and more proactive than others.
Yeah.
That sell plants. So, yeah.
Okay, so we have then a proposal by Councilor Morrison to cut it to 2,000. Do we have anybody seconding that?
Sure.
Okay, Councilor Page.
Your proposal, or did you just make that one up for us?
She did make it up. She did propose it.
Okay.
Said to
Reduce it to 2,000.
Yeah.
Any more discussion on that? Gets us for 16. Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Yep. Okay, we're good on that. So that's 2,000 on 6.
Plan B would be the Azushi project of 7.
Plan B is the sushi project.
What do you mean plan B?
I'm just suggesting if you don't need the if we can manage the market without that 7,000,
Yeah.
then Azushi would be fully funded at whatever you guys have agreed to now. If we can't, then use that as the 7,000 comes out of that project.
Okay.
Can I just ask that,
So they did get 1,500, that was what the Fortis community thing, I just heard that from Blair Weston, so it's not a lot of that project.
It's a little bit.
I just, again, I'm just talking about food security. Are we cutting off food security?
No, I'm just saying, so we don't make a decision on that 7 right now. If it's needed, it will be there, but if it's not needed, then it can fund the balance of
Yeah.
what you would reduce the Azushi project from.
So the proposal is the Zushi set down by 7,500. Anybody want to take the lead on that?
I move,
Okay,
do we reinstate the funding for Sazenji Society,
okay.
and that we, I don't think we need to put anything in about the market at this point in time, right?
Yeah, if you just reduce that 7 from
Yeah.
Azushi at this stage, and we'll bring that back when we find out about the
He
market
said
proposal.
reinstate, and you said, like,
Yeah,
you,
I'm not sure
you're-
what he meant by
So-
reinstate.
Mayor Dooley, can you clarify what you're
I
saying?
think the Sazenji Society should be fully funded.
You're saying they should be fully
okay,
funded.
he's saying the opposite.
You're saying the opposite?
What
You're
I
saying
was,
only if the market,
right,
right, only if
The-
the market,
if we can do the market without the 7,000, then that funding would fully be available for Azushi. If
Right.
not, then it would come off.
so you want the opposite way around.
Yes.
If
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can fund the
that's what I
market
heard too.
in-house, then we fund the Sazenji Society.
Right.
There you go.
You're good with that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, any seconds? Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okay.
Just for the
I think I'm
spreadsheet,
there.
Chair Lochtenberg, if you could clarify, are you, council indicating that the current starting point for Azushi, which is at 10 grand, would now fall to 3? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Yeah.
For the purposes of the spreadsheet at the
Yeah.
moment? Okay.
And
For the
depending on what
purposes of
happens.
the spreadsheet at the moment.
Well, it depends on what happens with the market. Then, well,
Yeah.
Kevin, you know this. Okay.
No, clarity's good, thank you.
As a question, if I may.
Yeah.
I was wondering on 27, if you were thinking of shooting
No?
Oh yeah, that's a
Like
good
the
one.
next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a real.
I'll,
And then you can bump that back up to Azushi.
I'll second that.
Bump that to a Zushi.
Not necessarily. No, we still need to get down 30,000, don't we?
Oh, I think we
Oh,
got
no, we
there.
got that, we're there.
So
Got that,
that,
we're already
that
28
does
now.
mean you take, we'll just summarize, so that does, let's, on 33, that would mean cutting that by the 7,500.
That was rather.
Daybreak, multi-generational park down to 7,500 to get them over 50,000.
Do we need to
That
vote on
would
that?
mean reducing the seniors project by 10,000.
Yeah.
It would mean reducing Nelson at its best by the 5,000, because we have a strong indication they might be successful on their other project. And I think the rest are on this spreadsheet,
That's correct.
and
Just can I just missed it there, but, so did we reduce both 27 and 38, both to 0, both the swimming things?
yeah.
Yes.
Is that carried on the?
Yeah.
27?
On 27?
Yeah.
I think so. Councilor Woodward, and we had a second. All in favor on yes. Yes,
we
did.
Okay, so that's 1,000.
Okay, so
So now we're
do you have-
21,000. We gotta.
before these question marks, is that correct?
That is correct. So we still have essentially, we're looking at that 10,000 on number 30, the 5,000 on number 19, that's 15, and then 7,500 on 33, so
Oh,
that takes you
actually-
to 22, so.
Oh, you want to keep it at 7,500, so we're actually, whatever.
Sorry. Can you go through those ones with question
74,
marks
50
again?
or
So that we're all on the.
Yeah, no problem. Number 30, which is the seniors
Yeah.
center, so we're talking about a $10,000 drop there.
So what's the exact number that we're thinking of then?
Is that on the sheet now?
28.
It would be going from 38 to 28. It's
28,000.
not on the sheet, so that 21,000 that
let's
we
lock
still
these
need to
in.
cut is not including that.
Can we lock some of these in just to see where we're
Yeah.
at? Because we can always, if we're like, oh, we actually have 5,000,
Yeah.
then we can throw 5,000
Throw-
somewhere.
So, what line are we locking in here?
30, senior center.
Senior center. Okay, so we're reducing
Death
that
of
by
my career.
28. All
By 10.
by 10
to
to 28. Yeah. All in favor?
Okay, then,
Rotary.
Rotary would be actually 7250, because you wanted to keep it at
Yeah.
7,500.
Yeah.
So we're down to 11?
Yeah, but we haven't done the Rotary yet.
Yeah, that we just
Rotary
did.
Did it.
I'm sorry,
It would be
7250.
7,500 would be the amount in the sheet. So we'd reduce it by 7250, right?
Yeah.
If you just put 7,500 in there, then we're good.
Okay, so now we're down to 3.
And do you have the 5,000 for Nelson at its best?
We have not put that on the sheet yet, so we could cut that.
Now, did we bump up Azushi by the difference,
Yeah.
that extra 1,000?
Not, I wasn't sure if that carried.
Would we take the additional 1,500
If you put, yeah,
and put that back to Azushi?
So Azushi goes up 1,000 from 3 to 4.
it's actually 1128.
1128.
We'll take the 5,000 off and add.
Does anybody want to move that?
Wait, I all of a sudden I have no idea where we are.
Yeah, what's,
We've
5,000
Number
on
24.
19, reduce that to 0.
Reduce number 19.
Number 19 to 0.
Zero.
we can add back like 1,200 basically.
Okay.
It's 1128, I think.
1128.
what's the
Add
number?
the balance to Azushi.
Yeah,
Are we good with that?
What'd you do with 19? I'm sorry, I missed.
0.
Zero.
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 Zero, okay.
What's the new number on Azushi, Yip?
Azushi is now at 4,128.
4,128, okay.
When
We
that-
could go to 1128
Yeah.
if we can figure out the
Market.
Market.
outside of this.
Right.
Right, okay.
I think you should
Otherwise, the
try.
market is in right now for the 7 million.
Right.
Well, I have to say that I'm actually opposed to the market being in at all. And Councillor Woodward mentions food security. And I think that the fact that they haven't applied to the regional district, that's what bothers me about it.
Yeah.
Because it is one doesn't work without the other. You can't have a market in Nelson if you don't have farmers in the regional district. And you can't have farmers in the regional if you don't have a market in Nelson. And I think, the West Kootenai Eco Society have been long enough at this now that you'd almost think that they'd know to apply to the partner that would have as much at stake in this market as the city does. That's,
So the intent is for them to reach into or go back to those directors. I don't know if we've heard anything back.
I don't know, well, Councillor Anderson did bring that up in the past, but I don't know if that's going anywhere or not, so.
Yeah, we spoke with the Eco Society last week. Councillor Anderson was included in that meeting. And they, Montana did reach out to the three RD directors and was told to go to 5 altogether, is that right?
I think this is,
That was it. And she needed to go through their discretionary fund, process.
Yeah, and I
So
think,
we'll have that for you before you make a final decision on this.
well, we would need to know that, like, I'd need some comfort in
Yeah.
that, because,
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
really, I wanna see the best farmer's market in the world right here in Nelson. And I think it can only happen if we're all in this together. And that includes the area directors that or the areas that are identified in that magazine that I have in my office that shows all the way from Revelstoke, Grand Forks, to the East Kootenays, to the US border. If all of those people are partners in this farmer's market in all of our communities, we would be second to none in the world as far as supporting the folks that are gonna supply the food to us.
Yeah, so that will come
That's-
back before you make a final decision. So you'll know exactly how much the,
Bring to the table.
yeah.
I just want to say that I totally understand what you're saying, Mayor, and I get that. I just want to make sure we aren't punishing the farmers for something that an organization didn't follow up on.
Well, hopefully they're getting the message,
Yeah.
and like, they need to get the message.
I know,
Everybody needs to be involved.
what's that?
They should be phoning their directors.
Absolutely.
I understand that, and I'm not arguing for Eco Society. I'm arguing just that I don't want to cripple our farmers because of an organization, right? That's all I'm
And
saying.
we'll have that information so you can make an informed debate. If the directors don't come through, then you're gonna still have this debate.
And I want to state for the record, I am not arguing for Eco Society. I am arguing for food security and farmers, so.
Councillor Page?
So just for clarity, we are settling here for now.
Yeah.
Should we come up with a different plan for the farmers market in general, this is our plan A. If there's a different thing we approve at a later date as this comes forward, the 7,000 that's currently earmarked on this spreadsheet for the farmer's market would shift over to the Azusa Society, which would be doing improvements at the potential location of the farmer's market.
Exactly. There's a benefit regardless.
Okay.
So just one more piece on that.
think-
if I may.
also, Councillor Morrison.
Oh, Council Morrison, and then,
Sorry, I wanna talk about something besides the market.
I'm gonna talk about the
So,
market.
if somebody wants to talk about the market, let's get that over with, because I wanna talk about some other things that are on this list.
okay, so Councillor Woodward, and then,
No.
oh no, Councillor Anderson, and then Councillor Woodward. Sorry.
Yeah, so
Nope.
just
No, you're good.
So just
Okay.
just one other question. So when I was in that meeting, and just clarify if I'm wrong, I thought that the Eco Society was under the impression that they might still get the 10,000 for Market Fest to run the festival. And I'm just wondering about that funding, or to run the markets. And I just wanted to make sure that that had been clarified with them.
I met with Jordan today and we started working on a proposal
Okay.
for them. I think we had we did have the conversation about the 10,000, about, asking RD
yeah.
directors as well. I thought I made it pretty clear
Okay.
that if the city was partnering,
Yeah.
there's no reason that they would need the 10,000.
Right.
And they've already received 15,000 from CBT.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make
And
sure that was
would-
clear.
And I can't say how they would
Yeah.
allocate that money, but I can say that Jordan and I both agreed
Okay.
today that we were on the right page. They will see all of our numbers.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good.
Okay, Councillor Morrison.
Okay, so I have a couple here, so bear with me, and then people can either jump in or they can just ignore me completely. But ones that come to my attention here are still some ones that we all ponied up some money for. Now I'm just talking about the amount of money that we're in for. So I'll start with number 10, the Glacier Gymnasium Club, all in multi-purpose gymnasium. Again, this raises for me the question about the civic center and what we're doing there. Gymnastics is great. I don't deny any of the things about gymnastics and their value and the need for physical literacy. You guys all know I'm kind of the sports geek on the council compared to lots of the other things that everybody else is passionate about. But I do wonder, as we let one group in what I've always considered as a very public building, continue to sort of build out their stock and their inventory. And I did read that they were going to make sure that things hung from the ceiling so dance floors stayed open so it could be multi-purpose and other groups come in. But again, we've never gone out to the public to say, do you want this public facility to house these 4 things? And as we let them grow, that's what it's going to be for forever. So that was a question, and that's part of why I probably didn't put in as much money on this one as others did, in terms of if this is what we see as the direction as the council and as the public in Nelson, is that gymnastics should just build out and use whatever space is available. I'm good with that, but I don't know that we've asked the community the question. So that's 10. And then I look at 17 and 18, the hospice society ones, and nobody's saying that hospice isn't a good thing to have in town. Again, another one in my sector, hospice is very important. We gave quite a bit of money, well, it was actually a little bit less, to 11, which was the Kaleen Hospice Society. We had 2 back-to-back requests here from the Nelson and District Hospice Society. And I'm wondering here, in terms of looking at the money, whether or not there was any feeling about reducing those amounts a bit, in terms of trying to get, and they were all 5s, just trying to move this money around a little bit more.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I think that hospice is extremely important. I also think removing or not providing funding for hospice during a pandemic is not good luck. It just seems, I do think that is important, and I'd like those numbers to stay there. Yeah.
Councilor Woodward.
I noticed up at the leaderboard here that we're at 0. So
Yeah.
we don't actually have to remove any more money, is that
We could allocate.
Unless you wanted to allocate, you wanted to lift somebody else up.
right?
Yeah, just move it
If you
around.
want Plan B to be one of these instead of
Right.
So-
fishy.
I've, and if I can mind,
Yeah.
like I had 0 for both of those,
For the
Yeah.
Kalen.
for the hospice.
Yeah.
And for many of the reasons that Janice brings up, but none the least, the one in particular was the West Kootenai one. You know, I just sort of, like when you have back-to-back ones like that, I just find that kind of odd, you know, I know they're different project in some respects, but like the Eco Society was different projects they had in, and the invasive weed group was same thing, but the hospice is hospice no matter where you are,
Right.
so.
So, all right, Janice and John, are you proposing reducing those and then reallocate? So you would
Yeah.
like to reduce it to,
I would support the reduction. I mean, I put 0 in.
okay.
I'd support the reduction.
Janice, do you second that?
If it would help you bring somebody, lift somebody
I was
else
just,
up.
it's just, I'm just looking, this is part of what we do here, is we look and we try to see like,
Yeah.
okay, we landed on these numbers, and then when I look kind of across, there's, some of these have a lot of variations, where people put in 1,000 and people put in 6,000, right? Like, is there a 3,000 that a person can land at? It's just, I'm just trying to look at the numbers. If we've gotten to 0, it's kind of a moot point. So, you know, but it's just that was a big ask. It's one organization, and that was a really big ask. I don't know why it was in 2 asks. I did read their papers, but I saw a lot of overlap in what they were asking the money to have the money for. And so just trying to look at it just in terms of what they were asking. Yeah.
Okay, so, John, you're making a move to reduce it. Janice, you're seconding it? Yes?
I just heard that we don't need to reduce, we don't have to find any more money.
No, but we're moving, yeah, I'm happy if we end it now, but I was understanding you wanted to
Well,
move
we
things
could
around.
reallocate.
Yeah, like reallocate.
What do you want to reallocate it to?
Well, I personally would reallocate it to the Rotary Club project,
The Rosemont.
but that'd be up to council, you know.
Okay,
So you
so that's the
seconding that?
proposal on the table.
I would make a motion to reallocate those funds to the Nelson Rotary Daybreak project in Rosemont, yeah.
What is the Nelson Rotary Daybreak at right now?
28.
28?
7,500.
7,500.
So what if we took 2,000 and 2,000 from the hospice and then reallocated the 4,000?
Well, we're already deciding where we're putting the money. We should probably just talk about whether we're taking the money away. I would speak against and it's to Councillor Anderson's point. You read through their proposal, and it's specifically targeted at psychosocial support for frontline workers who are supporting seniors, and like this is a support one-on-one line for caregivers and the 200 caregivers and 200 seniors they care for. So this is mental health, skills, confidence care. It's a support network for those people that are dealing with some pretty hard situations in the first place. And I think in this environment, I don't think this is the one we want to be reallocating funds for a park that maybe the kids will be on bikes a lot more in the forest instead.
Well, it's an all gender park actually, an all ages park. I beg your pardon.
No, fair enough.
So I would
think it's the time
yield to Councillor Morrison on that one. Are there other bodies dealing with managing that, Janice, that you're aware of?
Have you guys?
No, these are the 2 groups, and it's like, you know what, and it's not, I have to say, John, Mr. Mayor, that I don't really feel that if we were to reduce this, that I would be giving it to Rotary. I'm just looking at places that there is a disparity across the board here of numbers that varied from zeros to the full amount. And so I'm just trying to figure, did we land in the right spot on some of these? That's really my question.
The other lens that you're
To go ahead, if we're at 0, I'm good to, let's finish this. We've got lots of other business that we have to take care of.
The other lens you're supposed to look at is the community feedback, and I do notice Rotary is a ton of people supported that one. Which one are we talking about now?
Kaylin.
Nelson and District Hospice Society.
Yeah, that was an extremely flawed collection model in terms of how, that feedback was collected. And you can get, if you're a Rotary and you have, a big email list, it's easy to get a lot of support. I'm sure Rotary does have a ton of support in this community because they've done so many amazing things. It's just, I put very little, stock in that public feedback thing, just because I don't think it was done in a way that was sort of, we can evenly apply it.
Yeah, they were pretty clear that you needed to consider that. Not, you can weight it. I'm just saying that was a requirement that you pay attention to that at least at some level.
So we've got a split between two. You're withdrawing or? No, because we've got
Honestly,
two.
At this stage, it really isn't, it's not that important, to be honest with you. I'm just thinking if we're looking for projects that we may have shaved back earlier on, that we could allocate funding to from somewhere else that we were sort of marginal on.
But we are at zero, right? Like
We're at zero. It was just a reallocation from
Yeah,
Kaylin,
exactly.
and it's up to Cal and Jesse. Oh, sorry, it's not. I keep saying Kaylin. It's two different. Nelson Hospice Society. Sorry.
Personally, I'm willing to let's move forward. We're at zero. That's my 2 cents, and let's get this done.
That's fine. That's fine.
Is that okay?
Seconded.
All right. All in favor? Done.
Okay with that?
That's it, we're done.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment now that we're done this?
Yep.
In going through this weekend and fighting, and you want to give everybody all the money, and there's in reality there's, if you gave there's 50 cents on the dollar, but we're very quick during the year when we can't give somebody some funds when they come knocking on the door to go and apply for a CIPS grant.
Yeah.
But the message should be apply for a CIPS grant and roll the dice there. Because just because you apply doesn't mean you're going to get it or you're going to get all of it. I think that needs to be the message, because I was feeling guilty thinking we told some of these people to go and get apply for the CIPS, and they're probably thinking, oh yeah, I should apply for that and get it. Well, you're not necessarily going to. I think that has to be the reality.
Yeah.
That's just my own thoughts.
Yeah, but anyone that applies for funding regularly, the city of Nelson included, sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't, and there's always usually more projects than there is money.
And I think too, there's the difficulty now with what's happened, and now we're all kind of like seeing through that lens of this sort of emergent situation. How do we best spend the money in that? So it's definitely not a regular year, but I hear you, Cal. It is challenging. There's never enough money to cover it all.
I know, it's funny. I thought it was hard last year.
Joy, I think we're done. Did you want to leave us with some comments or anything before we wrap this up?
No, I think that was it. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Joy. Thanks for your work.
Great CBC interview today.
Oh, Sean, today?
Oh,
Yeah, she's talking about the Castlegar sculpture walk. It was great.
Cool, that's an awesome
Thanks.
project. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So we're going to do council reports. Do we have any council reports?
Nope.
Nothing's happened for 2 months.
I'll do a quick one.
Okay.
Okay, just let me grab my notes here. So Recommission is meeting next week. So far, direction from staff is the facility will most likely be remaining closed until at least July 1st. I was confirming that beforehand. I also sit over on the library board, which is having its meeting tonight, but they have moved to takeaway service. So books are rolling back out of the library. So if you haven't been using that, aside from all the lovely online services, that is actually, I think people have seen quite a lot going out of the library the last couple weeks. And we had our most recent meeting at the Nelson Housing Committee, and we got a preliminary look at the needs assessment that the RDCK is putting together. There's quite stark numbers coming out of that so far, and they're digging further into the analysis side of things. There's much need and starvation of 3-bedroom homes for young families. It just does not exist in the city, and I think that's something to keep an eye on. And of course, quite a lot of people are spending more than 30% of their income, and of the people who are spending more than 30% of their income, quite a lot of them are spending more than 50% of their income. So those were some of the highlights that I recall out of that meeting. And that's my council report for the moment.
Okay.
Excellent.
I will.
Yep, go ahead.
I think a few of us around the table were there, but the chamber held their AGM last week, and it was a virtual meeting that was challenging to say the least with the technology, but there was 6 positions open for and 7 people running, and we welcome Chris Drysdale, Sean Dooley, and you should never name the people in the room, should you?
Mike,
the other
isn't
new one.
Michael?
Michael.
Horror?
No,
Yes.
no, he didn't run.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Anyways, the chamber continues to do some great work in advocacy, and especially right now with, partnered with the city and the NAEDP and Kootenay Lake Tourism. And the chamber, I think we're punching above our weight level here. We're, I think, doing a fantastic job, so.
Great.
Leave that with you.
I couldn't agree more. I can remember a lot of years here that it was marginal about funding the chamber, et cetera. Boy, I'll tell you right now, I'm glad we have them.
So,
Excellent.
yeah, it was Darren Davidson,
Darren
Chris,
Davidson.
yeah.
Darren, I'm sorry, Darren.
Sorry, Darren.
Congratulations,
He is
everybody.
watching, by the way.
Yeah.
He's texted me a couple
Oh, really?
Uh-oh. Councillor Morrison.
Darren, who?
Oh, just to report that tomorrow, the RD continues to do business. Tomorrow we are having the Joint Resource Recovery meeting in the afternoon, and on Thursday will be the regular monthly board meeting. I just want to remind people, I don't have the number here on me, but it should probably be posted on the regional district website, is that the public can, during the public session, call in. So far, only one person has taken the opportunity, and that was a reporter from the Valley Voice. But you can listen in, and then during their regular public time, if you actually had a question to ask, you could ask your question on the phone line. So for those people that wonder that because of the fact that we don't live stream or anything, you don't get to have as much excitement, but you could sit on the end of the phone and listen to both of these meetings this week.
Are they virtual meetings, Janice?
Oh, we don't do virtual, we just do them by telephone only, so there is no streaming.
Oh,
Okay. I'll give my report. So at the UBCM Climate Action Committee, we're wrapping up. We've got 1 meeting left, potentially 2 meetings left. And our recommendations, signature recommendations are the 21 signature recommendations, and then the signature ones, I can say primarily will be around retrofitting, a province-wide retrofit program that's pretty exciting. And on the UBCM Climate Action Committee, we do have 2 members from the Climate Action Secretariat, including the Executive Director, and as well as a Deputy Minister from, I forget which ministry. Anyways, doesn't matter.
energy.
No. But so my point there is that it's the province is very much aware, and they've been a part of the decision-making and rationalizing process to these big asks. So what's exciting about that, I think, is that Nelson's in a great position to lead on these recommendations, particularly the retrofitting. And the key thing I think about the retrofit program is the scale we're talking about. 500,000-600,000 deep retrofits across the province. That's like 20% of the province's housing stock. We're talking about an industry change, and the province has been very much encouraging that saying that they're going to stick to their climate commitments, including the Climate Accountability Act, which means that despite COVID, they're really going to be focusing on part of the economic recovery being around their climate change objectives. And I think that's going to look like retrofitting, as well as transportation upgrades. So transit is one thing that's, I think, particularly interesting. The feds have also declared retrofitting to be a part of their agenda, as well as I've been in close contact with the Ministry of Infrastructure and Communities, and they are, it's a small ministry, interestingly, but they've got huge budgets, particularly through the Infrastructure Development Bank, and they're saying, and I think they announced today, or yesterday, no, it would be today, that transit is going to be something that they're going to invest in with the goal towards electrification of transit. So good news there from the feds. A lot of the federal money, infrastructure money, will go through the provinces. They have said that they're not going to introduce new programs, but they will be relaxing existing programs.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. So that's going to be really interesting for sort of innovative proposals. Now, one thing that they did say very clearly is this is not a 2008 recovery. So this idea of it's going to be an infrastructure, like big investments in infrastructure, they see that that's not what this recovery looks like because there's not a lot of downturn in that sector.
Yeah.
The big pain is being felt among young people in the service economy. And so they're really interested and open minds to any proposals that put those kinds of people back to work, younger people. And if we can come up with programs that are, geared towards young people, geared towards service people, transition them out of the restaurant industry into something sustainable, they're very much open doors to our proposals. And then finally, a number of us you're all welcome to a conference this week. It's called Together Ensemble. It's a national conference around the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, if you don't know what they are a set of targets that the federal government has committed to achieving by 2030 across all sectors. So there is a climate change component, but there's one related to economy and the transition to a more sustainable economy. There's one related to buildings. There's one related to infrastructure. There's all sorts of sort of goals, 17 in total. So the feds do not know how to deliver this across the country. They've committed to it, but then they're now scrambling to figure out what does this actually mean for policy. And what they've sort of settled on, it looks like, is that local governments are probably how that they can operationalize these goals. So again, I guess I would want to stress for us and to staff that if we can, in your proposals or in any grant proposals we do that might end up towards the feds, reference sustainable development goals and which ones this might help advance will be something that will be, it'll be just one more, box to check that if you can say, and this includes things like housing, like if we can say as a part of this sustainable development goal to deliver affordable housing to our population, this is what we're doing, and it also does energy retrofits, it also helps to transition the economy and so on. So that conference starts tomorrow and it goes to Friday if you're interested in joining. It's virtual, it's free, sponsored by the feds. And I think that's...
Send that information out through Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, I will. And I think that's it.
Good.
Okay. So, I think we're done. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Seconded by Councillor Page. All in favor?